and welcome back to SuperCoach Edge. I am once more El Capitano of the SuperCoach Edge ship as Liam recovers from surgery on an injured ACL, which we spoke about in previous episodes. But if you haven't heard that, it was via we can't call it on-field, but an on-court incident as he was playing netball. So sport injury, and he has undergone a bit of ACL repair. All has gone well, and by all reports is in line to beat Sam Doherty's comeback timeline. He mentioned to me that initially he was looking at 6 weeks on crutches, but that's been downgraded due to the fact that his knee started to repair itself, because I think he had an injured meniscus among the ACL injury as well. But no doubt he'll be able to use his recovery time to brush up on some practice matches. But mind you, he is on the good stuff. So all the players probably look like pixies and pink elephants, which probably isn't much different to what he normally watches when it comes to Essendon and Carlton, I can say as well with great authority. But before we jump into things, on behalf of Liam and myself, I just want to thank each and every one of you for your incredible support, particularly when it comes to our YouTube subscribers, as we have just ticked over 2,000 subs. In fact, as I record this, it's gone up to 2,029 subs. So absolutely incredible support and blown us away. As I always say, and I'm sorry for saying all this, because no doubt you've heard it ad nauseum, but really have to highlight this because it really does reflect the level of support that you guys and girls give us along our journey, and we are super, super appreciative. So thank you once more.
This calls for a celebration. I will.
Now, let's get into things. Today, we are finally jumping into the most sought-after analysis in mid-Premos. Yes, we are finally there. So without further ado, let's jump into it. But of course, remember to follow us across the following social channels on YouTube. Simply search SuperCoach Edge, and don't forget to subscribe to be notified of when our content drops from week to week. Click the notification bell as well, which also gives you those, I guess, notifications, speaks for itself. On Spotify, Apple Pods, if you listen to us, don't forget to give us 5 stars and a glowing review if you have time, and well, if you like us, that is. Twitter, at @supercoach_edge. You can find myself at DamoJ88 and Liam at LiamEvans_95. Facebook, Insta, and TikTok, just search SuperCoach Edge and you'll find us there. Now, Liam, I think I did a pretty good job this time around going through that. So let me know your thoughts, because you can sit back, recover with your knee, and analyze me with great intent. But let's get into things without further ado. As I said, first up, we have the man, the myth, the moment. Marcus LeBont, as I call him, Bontempelli, priced at 681k. 2024 average was 126.4. In terms of buys, only has the one buy round 12, which is always a welcome sight. Ownership at the moment, as I write up this run sheet, 49.9%. So just a touch under 50%. I do think personally that is a little bit of a surprise. I thought he'd be actually higher than that, but I will get into, of course, the reasons why some have jumped on him and the reasons why others have particularly maybe faded him. So Bont, of course, had another stellar year in 2024, averaging the second best average of his career with 126.4 to follow up his career best previously of 129.7. Bont, he begins 2025 priced 43k cheaper than he did last season, surprisingly. So does present, I guess, in that sense, comically as value if you view it in that sense, but he is still the most expensive player in the game, priced 12.1k ahead of the next most expensive player in Maxi Gawn. But what you're paying for is not just his consistency and dominance, but also his reliability as a captaincy option week after week, having eclipsed 20 100-plus scores and 13 120-plus in 2024. Courtesy of Jaden Popowski, who does some incredible work on Twitter. Check out his website, Stats by Jaden. Looking at the breakdown of Bont's scoring gives a little bit of an insight into his dominance overall. So Bont's goal-kicking ability makes up a fair chunk of his scoring overall from week to week, with 16.5 points on his average coming via those means, which ranks him second for midfielders behind Warner in terms of scores through goals. But in terms of generating scores via 1%ers is where he really holds the crown, with a whopping 11.7 points in this category on average from week to week, which is the most of any midfielder in back-to-back seasons. So, of course, he held the crown back in 2023 and then reclaimed that back in 2024, of course, last season. In terms of the verdict, Liam hasn't given his verdict, but I imagine it's very, very similar to myself. As far as I'm aware, he does have him in his team. What I've said here is that he is a lock for me yet again, and probably even more so a lock this season compared to last season. I paid an extra 43K extra last year to have him in my starting team, and I had no regrets. Consistent, reliable, dominant, lock and load, really. I spoke of it last season, this time, I guess in the preseason, that I was kind of thinking about maybe fading him because he was at a higher price point, obviously, than what he is at the moment. And as it turned out, he actually dropped, I think it was around about 100K in the end, in the first, I think it was maybe 2 months of the season. So if you did fade him, you might have been okay, but you would have missed out on those early big scores that he had. All it takes is, as we know, historically, for any player that's priced above really at 600K, all it takes is really a down game on any given week, which can then be compounded by, potentially back-to-back ordinary games, which will then see their price plummet. With Bont, this may happen again, potentially, but I think, as I said, that's kind of outweighed by the fact that he is a genuine captaincy option from week to week. And given that, I'm quite happy to pay that extra money in order to get him into my team. So kind of that's where I'm thinking, that's where I'm sitting. For me, as I said, he's a lock and load. But if you want to go the other way and you want to fade him, that's totally up to you. But I do think, as we saw last season, the season prior, he is at the top of his game, and he's someone that you really want in your team come the end of the season. So I think take the headache out of it and just start him in your team. And that's where I sit on Le Bont. Let's move on to the next player, and it is Zach Butters, 648.9K. 2024 average was 120.4 and only has the round 12 bye. So what I will start with here, of course, the ownership with Butters, as I wrote this, was 26.1%. Has probably gone down. I'll have a look in a moment as to what that is off screen. But off the back of that, and what I'm alluding to here, is the latest news that has come out about Butters, if you haven't heard, is that he has unfortunately sustained bone bruising in his knee following a knock that he did sustain. I think it was in training. Early reports are that he will miss the start of the season, to quote what I've seen in the article released on Port's website, but the recovery timeline, or the official timeline, will become clearer following an arthroscope on his knee in the coming days. So if you're listening to this now and down the line and you have heard a timeline, that's kind of what we're looking at here. But as I record this, I do not know a definitive timeline, but what they've said is they can kind of have a little bit of confidence in knowing that more than likely than not, he's going to miss the start of the season, which probably means that we can't start him in our sides. But we're going to proceed forth and just analyse his season in 2024 and project forward for 2025 on the, I guess, the optimistic side of things, on the chance that he does actually start the season come round one. So Zach Butters is basically, I guess, the definition of good at footy, really, to sum him up. But he's not just good, but consistently good. Last season, he averaged 120.4, and with a nice early fixture that includes Collingwood, Richmond, Essendon, St Kilda, Hawthorn, Sydney, North Melbourne, the Dogs, and Adelaide, Butters could be on track to make a serious mark in your Supercoach team early on, of course, with an asterisk if he does start in round one. All right, let's take a peek at some of those past performances that he has had against these teams in his past 3 encounters. So Collingwood, averaging 98.3, Richmond 122.6, Essendon 117.6, the Saints 97.33, Hawthorn 122.6, the Swans 96.3, North 118.6, the Western Bulldogs 141, and Adelaide 119.6. So that's a pretty tasty menu of fixtures, right? Some juicy matchups where Butters has shown that he can absolutely explode. And his floor is also pretty solid with just 3 scores under 90 in 2024. And we're talking 17 scores over 110 and 12 scores over 120 as well. And that's not just consistency, that's potential captaincy material nearly every week, which is what I spoke about with Bont. The only challenge here is his dreaded round 12 bye isn't the best. The first bye that we do have to encounter in the mid-season. But, it's one of those things where you need to weigh up quality over, finding coverage at that stage of the season. Hopefully you will have upgraded your team enough to find some ample cover off the bench for that round 12 bye, but it is something to keep in mind. Now, I will say, just circling back to that ownership number that I did note, this is really highlighting how much his ownership has dropped. His ownership has now dropped down to 13% from 26.1%. So obviously people have caught wind of the news of that knee injury that he has sustained. And given that he will, I guess at this stage, people are saying that he will most likely miss the start of the season. Makes sense as to why his ownership has been slashed by 50%. But we cross our fingers, we wait and see what the arthroscope does uncover, and hopefully it is favourable news and he's able to, I guess, start the season in round one. But even then, I mean, it's never a good thing to sustain an injury niggle so close to the start of the season. So he's another player among a host of players that have gone down in recent weeks, which is not good at all, especially for someone of his quality that we're kind of using as a bit of, a set and forget type player or premo in our sides. Let's move on to the next player, and it is Lachie Neale, priced at 645.9k. 2024 average was 119.8 and has 2 buys, given that he is playing in opening round. So he has the round 3 buy and round 16. Ownership at this stage, 7.2% has gone up to 9% since I wrote this run sheet, which was a few days ago. So summarizing Neale's season, it was really reflective of the Lions in 2024 overall, who just kept leveling up, having elevated his average from 117.4 in the first half of the season to 121.9 in the second half, which was the second highest late season average behind Bont. And it was a season of dominance with 20 100 plus scores and 11 120 plus scores. But the question is, can he sustain his average or eclipse it to push towards the 122.8 that he had in 2022? And I mean, the big question here is, what of Father Time? Does it catch up with him now that he is approaching 32 years of age? We look at someone like Pendlebury, and his consistency across the years has been storied and absolutely been incredible for SuperCoach. He's been able to average 100 plus across many, many moons, many, many seasons, but those averages of 100 plus started to dip to low to mid 90s once he hit 32, 33 years of age. So natural regression is something that we have to come to expect at some stage for Neale as well, as good as he is. And then we factor in his early buy, and it's no surprise only nearly 93% of the SuperCoach comp have looked elsewhere, which at this stage has elevated up. So 91% of the competition have faded him thus far. But I guess with the likes of Butters being injured, it does mean that people have to deviate to other players. So hence the reason, no surprise there, why Neale's ownership has increased in recent times. For me, in summary, verdict is not for me. I don't think, I'm not really a fan of players that fit his age profile, as I said, when it's, the natural regression starts kicking in. I would rather hedge my bets and avoid him with the hope of potentially getting him cheaper post-buy, and I can't see him eclipsing 119. So at worst, I think he does hold his price as an upgrade target. That in combination, of course, with having the early season buy, the 2 buys, I think that automatically counts him out of my team. Makes it incredibly hard. I've spoken about it in the past where a player that has 2 buys, it means they're virtually going into the season with a bit of a handicap compared to those players that only have the 1 buy. So that's kind of key learnings coming out of 2024, but that sort of fits the bill when it comes to Lachie Neale. Let's move on to another player that does have another early buy as well, and it is an absolute tantalizing prospect, I guess, nonetheless. It is Nick DAICOS, priced at 631.4k, 2024 average 117.2, and does have the round 3 buy and round 14 as well. Ownership, it was, as I wrote this run sheet, 41.1%, has increased, believe it or not, to 47%, again, probably coming off the back of those people deviating from Butters and shifting across to Nicky DAICOS. Now, DAICOS is coming off a solid 2024 average of 117.2, as I said, and let's be real, you know what you're going to get with him. Mostly incredible scoring. And he's one of the guys you just want in your team. And when he's on, he's an absolute must-have, an absolute madman when it comes to, scoring points en masse. But there is a little bit of a wrinkle. DAICOS has had some foot issues in the preseason early on, and it has been in the form of plantar fasciitis, which made us all hold our breath for a bit. But the good news is that he's back training, has actually participated in the preseason match, which is gone on tonight as I record this, and looked really, really good, arguably best on ground. So it doesn't look like his foot problem will be an issue anymore. So we can, wipe our sweaty brow and proceed forward. Now, when it comes to DAICOS, there is a little bit of fun here because he does have the potential for monster scores, as we know, but sometimes the tags come in and ruin the fun. He copped some low scores last season in the form of scores of 54, 64, and 66, which is why some people might be hesitant to go for him. But let's be honest, you know you're eventually going to need him in your team. And that's, I guess, the one reason why I am looking elsewhere. I had him in my team, but he's the one kryptonite, I think, the only kryptonite for DAICOS is in the form of tags, and it does tie in with his early season fixture. And first up, he gets arguably the hardest tagger that will probably play on him in Toby Bedford from the Giants. Then they play Port Adelaide. Of course, Willem Drew has had a run with roll with him across the journey, or at least in recent times, and done a little bit of a job. Then he faces the Dogs, and you probably think that he will get off the chain for that game. Then faces my mob in Carlton, Sydney, and the Lions. So at least for those first two games, or at the very least for the first game, he's going to be shackled, you'd think, to Bedford. The benefit here is the fact that he does play the opening round, which I will get into in a moment with regards to one of the drawbacks with playing the opening round. But it does mean that we get a bit of a free look at DAICOS, see how he performs against Bedford and against the Giants. If he is able to score quite well, we can kind of be like, all right, well, that's one tag, or one of the harder tags that he's faced, and he has passed that test with a high score in his rolling average. It does mean that, in all likelihood, he's not going to drop in price, depending on, of course, how he performs across the next, two games beyond that in round 1 and round 2. But as I said, it's a risk-free look, and we can kind of assess from there as whether or not we have him in our sides. Now, on top of the fact that he does have those tagging issues, as I just spoke about, he does have the 2 buys, round 3 and round 14. So it means that he will play one less game compared to the likes of, a Bontempelli, for example, a Butters, which you need to weigh up the negatives, alongside. So, for example, if you owned DAICOS, you would be forced to play a rookie in round 3. And if that rookie were to score a 60 compared to Butters, who could score 120 against the Dons, I think he's playing Butters, that's a 60-point handicap deficit that DAICOS will need to make up compared to those non-owners. So in that sense, he starts with a virtual handicap due to that early buy. And that's kind of what I'm referring to there when I'm talking about a handicap. So in summary for me, as I said, I'm just going to be watching how he goes in round 0. If he's lighting it up, it might be time to pull the trigger, start him in your team, and sort of use that to outweigh the fact that he does have an early buy. Conversely to that, if he gets limited to a low score due to that Bedford tag, his price could, in all likelihood plummet, indicating he's not worth having in your side come round 1. Either way, we are all fully aware, of course, that DAICOS will be a necessity or necessary evil, if you want to call him that, at some point in the season. So he's definitely one to monitor in round 0. And I guess from there, you can react and work out if he is needed in your starting team. Let's move on to the next option, and it is Caleb Serong, priced at 623.4K. 2024 average is 115.7. Does have the round 13 bye, which is that favourable bye shared by St Kilda, only the 2 teams on that bye week from memory, and does definitely help you for coverage across all those other bye rounds where you kind of will be, especially round 12, as I spoke about, which is going to be a hard buy to try and cover, is going to help you there, most definitely. Ownership update for Serong as I scroll through is at 20%, which is quite healthy. No surprise, really, because he is coming off a 115.7 average in 2024. And, Liam's written this. He said that he's like that dependable mate who always shows up on time and somehow manages to bring snacks without having asked them to. So Liam likens him to that sort of mate. But for me, I just think he's just someone that's really good at footy, to really put it down to brass tacks. Averaging over 115 for 2 seasons straight now. So you're looking at a guy who's found his groove and has elevated his game to the next level. Freo, as I said, he's got that golden buy, sharing it with only St Kilda, meaning you can set your team up to avoid the dreaded, why did I pick all the guys with the buys in the same round buy? And those scenarios that you may find yourself in, which we may have learnt about in 2024 if you didn't, I guess, plan for those buys and spreading out your team so you're well covered. I think the one thing with Serong is his durability, which cannot be overlooked. 20-plus games in each of the past 4 seasons, and he's not the type to go missing for long stretches. Over his last couple of seasons, his average has been on the rise. 111.2 in 2023, then 115.7 in 2024. That there is, I mean, it's a 2-season sample size, but it does show a bit of growth in his game. Can he potentially step it up another notch in 2025? Well, Serong's consistency is another major selling point. He's had a couple of games in the low 80s with scores of 84 and 85, but his ceiling is sky high with 8 scores over 120 last season. That is what we call elite territory. The Dockers, they have a knack for rotating a number of players through the engine room, but I don't think we can expect Serong to be affected in any way, shape or form. He was the go-to guy in 2024, averaging the 79% CBAs when it comes to the midfield time. But we must be wary of his ability to draw a tag. And it's something which we saw reflect him at various stages in 2024, especially after that hot start that he did have, and with Brayshaw struggling for fitness and form. And this largely accounted for Serong's dipping in scores, which, dipped below 100 6 times across the season, but his lowest score, as I mentioned earlier, was only 84. So he does have a very, very high floor. Such is his impact and knack for finding the footy. So verdict for me, I brought him into my team early in 2024. I know a lot of people jumped on him. I think it was after his first price rise. He smashed out big scores in the first 3 games, and his price absolutely went through the roof. And I played a bit of a patient game, and I think I brought him in around about round 8, round 9, after his price actually dipped below his starting price off the back of one of those 80 games that he did have. So that was something that I was happy with. But what I soon found out and what I spoke about just there was, whilst he reclaimed that hot form after he came into my team, which was a good thing, so too came the tags, which saw him have only those 2 120 plus games in the second half of the season compared to the 6 120 plus games that he had in the first half. And that favourable buy round, I guess, for me in 2025 does elevate his prospects along with his high floor. So for me, off the back of Butters getting injured, he is someone that is in my sights to bring into my team. He wasn't really initially. I did rank him behind, obviously, Bont and Butters, but I think he's probably third in line for me as someone that I really, really want in my team, because I love having those players that have the high floor and the massively high ceiling. So he gives you that security, that safety net, but knowing also the fact that he is able to score quite well when he doesn't really attract the tag, when he's allowed to, I guess, roam around and just do what he pleases. Because the one thing I'm banking on here as well is that Brayshaw, as we saw in the back end of 2024, reclaimed his fitness and form. And as we've seen across the journey, Brayshaw has been able to attract the tag just as much as Serong. So that's going to definitely help him, I think, get off the chain and potentially fly under the radar with some games throughout the season. So he is in my team at the moment in place of Butters. Let's move on to the next player, and it is Zachariah, put it in H, MERRETT, priced at 621.1k. 2024 average is 115.3. Does have the 2 buy rounds, round 4 and round 16. And his ownership at the moment, let me just have a quick look at that, is 8%. So Zach MERRETT is, I guess, like the definition of consistency. He's been Mr. Reliable for many, many seasons now, with an average that's been eerily stable over the last 5 seasons, with averages of, get this, 115.3, 116.3, 112.2, 115 on the dot, and 115.6. So if you're looking for someone who will just give you what you expect every single week, MERRETT's your guy. So no surprises. He just has absolutely solid SuperCoach output. But there's a catch here. MERRETT starts the season in round 0, so you're automatically down a score compared to someone who's in round 1. As I spoke about, having that handicap off the back of that extra buy round. MERRETT, he did something a little different in 2024. He bucked his usual trend of going bananas after the buy. Usually, the guy, he does pick up steam as the season goes on, but this time around in 2024, his average dipped a little post-buy from 117.5 pre-buy to 112.4 post-buy. And it's something to keep an eye on, but it doesn't really take away from his overall solid numbers, because he still managed 11 scores over 120 and dropped below 100 just 5 times, which isn't too shabby, of course. But the big question for MERRETT in 2025, will he start like a house on fire like he did last year? In 2024, he was on fire early with scores of 127, 132, 131, and 136 in his first 4 rounds. He peaked at 668.8k before taking a dip to as low as 558.8. So if you're looking for, I guess making a bit of a quick buck, MERRETT's early season form could be a ticket, but I don't know if he really wanted to do that, because in my eyes, Merrett is someone that you want as a keeper in your team. The one thing I will point out as well, and Liam has written this down, is in the preseason so far, he's played a bit of a hybrid role, spending time in defense as well, or at least a bit behind the ball as sort of that get-out option. And that could boost his value if he gets more of that action in the season proper in 2025. So something to look forward to and something to look out for when it comes to the early rounds of the season, or at least, obviously, in the opening round. So we get a free look at Merrett, and if he does have that extra role, which does elevate his scoring, he's someone that potentially we could start in our team. Let's get to the verdict here, and Liam has written down his verdict. He said he's a pass at this stage, and he thinks he will be able to pick him up at a similar price throughout the season, which I do agree with, and his early buy makes it really hard to pick him. I think others like Serong and Brayshaw are better starting picks who won't miss early. I've written a similar thing here that I'm likening Merrett to Serong in the fact that he's very, very consistent, which I love, but you can't fit them all in, unfortunately, and I think with that early buy round, if he didn't have the early buy round, I'd probably have him alongside Serong, vying for that spot in my engine room, but it's just so hard to pick these guys, especially multiple players that do have the early buy round. So for me, pass at this stage, but he's someone that I'm looking to get into my team 100% as an upgrade target. Let's move on to a guy we just spoke about when we spoke about Serong, Andy Brayshaw, priced at 591.8k. 2024 average 109.8 and has the favourable round 13 buy. Ownership at this stage will have gone up. I've written down 9.2 as I wrote this run sheet. Still at 9-ish%. So pretty stable. When it comes to Brayshaw, consistency has been something that he has struggled with over the years, with his averages reflecting his seesawing output, with 109.8 in 2024, 109 in 2023, 111.8 in 2022, and 107.3 in 2021. And it's like he's caught in a bit of a time loop, of being close to taking the next step, but not quite being, above the mark of being elite. But, we are expecting, of course, Freo to improve this season, especially with their fixture. And with that comes the potential for Brayshaw's numbers to creep upwards and, veering into that elite territory. So maybe we see him hit a new gear. Maybe. It's anyone's guess, but the signs are there. The bad news, of course, as I spoke of with Serong, tags. Historically, when he has found consistent form, the tags are applied by the opposition. And the last thing you want is to sit there watching him rack up 65 points in the first half, only to then end up a meager 85 points because some bloke decided to follow him around like a shadow. Brayshaw, he copped 6 scores under 90 in 2024, but let's be real, he also had 10 scores above 120, so it's a bit of a roller coaster ride. As I said, with regards to Brayshaw, in the back part of the season is where he found form, and off the back of that, he spoke about it himself that it came off, largely getting his body right after, niggles that he did sustain or he was carrying throughout the majority of the early part of the season. And out of his final 6 games, 5 of those were 125 plus scores and lifted his 103.7 average from the first half of the season to 116.5. So he's one of those players who can drop a cheeky 130 when it all clicks. As I said with regards to Serong, the same applies to Brayshaw here in the fact that the one saving grace off the back of talking about tags is the emergence of Serong, who really became that tag magnet in 2024. So if Brayshaw and Serong are killing it in the same game, oppositions will need to decide, who to tag. Do they go for Serong? Do they go for Brayshaw? But it does mean that there's a 50-50 chance that Brayshaw is spared that tag. As I said, he's got the round 13 buy, and Liam has made a bit of a note here, which is quite humorous. I will read this out. He said that it's perfect for those coaches out there that do have a soft spot for planning your SuperCoach team like it's a military operation, ensuring that you have enough troops so you don't come out a cropper. Very well put, Liam, there. Verdict, he has said that for him, it's really hard to say whether or not he's going to finally crack that elusive 115 plus average, but if you're into low-key, steady performers who give you that occasional spicy score, Brayshaw might be your man. And I've said something similar as well. Like, I'm kind of speaking from, a position of being a previous owner of Brayshaw at various stages in recent seasons. And all I can remember is just sheer frustration due to, a largely limited ceiling. If you can carry that late season form of 5 120 plus scores in the last 6 games of 2024, he'd be a tantalizing prospect and someone that would almost be a lock and load. But given his history of being, well, I guess history of burning me, I should say, I would prefer to upgrade to him than starting with my team if need be. But I don't hold it against you if you do have Brayshaw in your team, because at that price point, 591.8k, he does present a little bit of value if he starts the season the way that he ended the season in 2024. So one to definitely keep an eye on. Let's move on to the next player, and it is LDU, Luke Davies-Uniacke, priced at 588k. 2024 average was 109.1 and has the round 12 bye, the hard one first up. Ownership at the moment, let me have a quick squeeze, at 6%. So LDU, what can we say? He's really the guy that we want to see step up this year. And why? Because it comes on a contract year. And you know what that means? He's playing for the bag, which could mean great scoring. When I talk about bag, I talk about the one that's filled with money. If your mind went elsewhere, that's just on you. In terms of, I guess, consistency, LDU isn't exactly the most reliable. His scores range from 67 all the way up to 152. And we're not talking about some tiny variation here. That's a massive gap. But what he does bring is potential. He had 10 scores over 110 last season, which is pretty solid, but also 7 scores below 100. It's like playing SuperCoach roulette with him, because sometimes he hit big and sometimes you don't. The big plus here, though, is that he played every game in 2024, which is a pretty solid tick next to his name, especially considering his injury history, especially in recent seasons. He'll be the man again this year for North Melbourne, and that means plenty of opportunity to improve on his average. Back in 2023, despite an injury-affected season, LDU still managed to average 113.6, and if he can stay healthy and find a bit of extra form, he could definitely lift that average, and at his current price, he presents a bit of a bargain. So if you're willing to gamble a little on the volatility that comes with LDU, he might just be worth it. In terms of verdict, it's a pass for me, but I will say with Sheasel, going into the midfield full-time now, you'd think it might allow LDU to get off the chain a bit more and escape opposition attention, but I'm not too confident in starting him in my team. If he turns out to be an upgrade target along the way and it means I have to pay a little bit extra, I'll be willing to do that. But it's always hard selecting players that play for, teams that are going to be in the bottom 3. Having said that, I think North Melbourne should improve, given natural improvement and their absolute young guns that I have in their team, as I spoke about with Sheasel, McKercher and the like. But with LDU, I just think he comes with a little bit of a risk as well, just at that price point. I think there are other better options out there. Let's move on to the next option here, and it is ERROL GULDEN, 581.9k, 2024 average of 108, and has 2 buys, the round 3 buy and round 14. In terms of his ownership, he is currently at 7%. And the big knock on Gulden, I guess, is he has shown he perhaps doesn't really have the highest floor. He had 12 100-plus scores from 2024 games and 7 scores below 90, which ranks him equal last alongside Sinclair of the top 20 averaging midfielders. So bit of a speed hump there, I guess, that Gulden needs to navigate in order to elevate his overall average. And likewise, he was only able to surpass 120-plus scores on 6 occasions, which ranks him equal third last of the top 20 averaging midfielders again. So not really good trends there. The upside, however, is he was able to pass 100-plus scores 16 times and 120-plus scores 9 times. So it was just a season of a slight decrease in production compared to his heights of his 111.3 average in 2023. He also came home like a freight train in 2024, scoring 111.2 in the second half of the season compared to 104 in the first half. But with a new coach at the helm, there is always the query of whether a player's role will stay the same. Does Gulden get moved around? Is he given more CBAs on top of the 36% that he did have in 2024? Or, alternatively, is he given less CBAs and camped out in the wing more often? These are just, some of the questions that we'll have to look to have answered when we get a free look at him in round 0. So, for me, he's not in my team. If he can, as I said, elevate the scoring ceiling and the scoring floor, then he definitely becomes almost a must-have option, I think, in my eyes, especially at that price point, but it's just too hard to assess at this stage. It's probably a good thing to see how he performs in the preseason match proper, and then obviously in the opening round as well, and get a bit of a look at him, which I think of all the players that we're talking about here, he is someone that we'd love to have a bit of a free look at, outside of obviously DAICOS in the opening round. Let's move on to the next player, and it is Christian Petracca, priced at 556.2k. 2024 average was just the 103.2, and 2025 he only has the round 12 bye, but albeit the dreaded one. Ownership, it was at 4.2%. I don't think that has changed since I wrote this run sheet. In fact, it's dropped down to 3%, believe it or not. Now, he starts with an immediate discount, I will say, when it comes to track, with that injury sub-affected score of 64 in 2024 impacting his overall average, obviously. So once that is taken out, his true average sits at 106.5. After recovering from his horrific spleen injury in 2024, Track sustained a cracked rib injury early in the preseason for 2025, which was a bit of a worry for those looking to have him in their starting teams. But the true worry in 2024 was his limited CBAs and his overall role, sitting at a career low 58.8%. Of course, that does discount his injury game as well. After 61%, 75%, 79%, and 66% CBAs over the previous 4 seasons. So this was due to more of a hybrid forward mid-role, which he took on in 2023. Continuing the lows with his scoring, he only posted 6 100-plus scores in 12 games, discounting, of course, again, his injury game, and just 3 120-plus scores. Now, with Track, for me, the big worry, I think, is whether psychologically he has recovered from that spleen injury, as he admitted himself that it did knock him around mentally, and we wouldn't want to see him shy away from his typical contested style of play. Otherwise, we can really kiss his SuperCoach-friendly game goodbye, or at least come in with expectations or lowered expectations that his scores will be able to reach the heights that he has had in previous seasons. So do the Ds perhaps continue playing him more forward in order to protect him, at least in the early stage in 2025, to ease him in? It's something that we do have to watch. But if he can regain confidence in his body and mind and get more CBAs, there is no other reason to suggest that he can't reclaim the heights of 2023 when he hit a career high average of 119.5 and could prove to be a bit of a bargain at the current price point. The verdict for me, well, I just think the uncertainty with his role is what is really holding me back from starting him. He is a juicy price point at the moment, and the return to form of the pink sweaty pig in Clary will no doubt help him provide a bit of a support for him, which is much needed. But I think I'm happy to wait and see with Track. There's just too many question marks with him with regards to, as I said, his role, but also the physical and mental well-being of him. And I do hope to see him regain that form because he's an absolute gun in the game proper, but also, as we know, in SuperCoach. Let's jump into the next player here, and it does round things out for the mid-premo episode here. Of course, there are players that we have missed deliberately. We've tried to go through and obviously chat about those higher owned players when it comes to, the ownership percentage and, touching on a couple of pod options as well. But for those players that we did miss, let us know and we'll potentially do a little bit of a bonus episode maybe, or a little bit of a write-up in the comment section below here on YouTube or even via socials. So Ed Richards does round things out for us, priced at 531k, 2024 average of 98.6, and does have that dreaded round 12 bye. Ownership was at a very low 2.7%, and let me have a bit of a look here as to what it's currently at. It is still at 2%, believe it or not. It's dropped a little bit from where it was. So Ed Richards, we're going to genuinely call him the wildcard pick because he's been flying under the radar, but with news that he's been shifted into the middle on a more permanent basis, he's suddenly getting more and more attention. Now, Treloar being out in the early part of the season, Richards has a chance to make an impact in the midfield. But having said that, another player that we've heard in recent days has sustained an injury in the form of a calf injury for Richards and is now in a fight to be fit for round 1. And at this stage, looks as though, calf injuries, historically are harder to get over compared to, a lower grade hamstring strain, such as the nature of the injury, because it's very, very easy to re-pull the calf and re-injure that. So they've got to be very, very cautious with regards to that. So I think a lot of people will be jumping off him, at least those people that do have him in their teams, the 2% of teams in the comp that do have him. But for argument's sake, much like Butters, in the case that, he is fit for round 1, let us continue our analysis of Ed Richards. So Richards has been getting some love at training with a tag placed on him to help him break through. In the preseason match against Essendon, he played 9 CBAs in the first half before being put on ice, which was a solid sign that they're very, very keen to see what he can do in the guts on a permanent basis. Of course, it's worth noting that Bont, Libert and Treloar were all missing, so let's not get too carried away, but still, he was the 4th string midfielder in 2024 and has now got that opportunity to rise. His foot skills are sharp, which could make him a sneaky option to elevate his scoring whilst he's in the middle. And at just 3% ownership at the moment anyway, asterisk, of course, if he is fit, he's a definite pod. He's a risk because if he doesn't fire, you'll be left behind, given that low ownership. But if he does fire, well, you're ahead of the game and the rest of the competition. Of course, there is that pesky round 12 bye, as I said, to navigate. So keep that in mind when making your decision. But hey, if you're willing to take the punt, Richards could be the one to help you stand out for the crowd. Again, asterisk, if he is fit for round 1. Now, verdict for me, the injured calf does mean that I put a line through him. I'm not a massive fan of starting players with injury niggles so close to the season beginning. But in season, he is someone that I can see as a bit of a bolter and a definite upgrade target that I will be monitoring once he does return to the footy field. Well, there we have it. That does round things out when it comes to part 1 of our broader discussion on midfielders, and in this case, premo midfielders. Next up, we'll be looking at, of course, mid-pricer midfielders. Before we sign off, of course, don't forget, you can join in the discussion by leaving a comment down below if you're watching us here on YouTube, or you can send us a DM on our other social channels. If you listen to us on audio podcast, or if you just want to slide into DMs, you can do that. Twitter, you can find us at supercoach_edge, at DamoJ88, that's myself, and you can find Liam at LiamEvans_95. Facebook, Insta, TikTok, just search Supercoach Edge, and you'll find us there. Spotify, Apple Pods. As I said, feel free to give us a rating, give us a review. It is more than welcome, and we do appreciate all of your feedback. And YouTube as well. Don't forget to like and subscribe. Hit the notification bell to be notified of when our content does drop. Thank you again for helping us get to the 2K subscriber mark on YouTube. Incredible stuff. And before the start of the season, well, we were kind of hoping that it would happen before the start of the season, but it's happened at least, a couple of weeks before kicking off. So really has surpassed expectations. So thank you, one and all. That's it, ladies and gents. Thanks again, and we'll catch you in the next one. Cheers.